Welcome to Monk's Temple. Find a place where you can be still. Let the day's weight settle around you, not as a burden, but as a blanket you can gently push aside. Feel the contact of your body with the chair, the floor, the bed. Notice the air moving in and out of your lungs, all on its own. There is nothing you need to do right now but listen. Listen not just to my voice, but to the silence that cradles it. We are entering a space of deep honesty, a conversation about a freedom so quiet, most people walk right past it their entire lives. It's not a freedom that comes from adding anything to who you are. It's a freedom that whispers to you when you finally stop trying to hold yourself up by leaning on everything else. Imagine you are standing in an old, vast library. Not a bright, modern one, but one with dark wood, soft lamplight, and that familiar scent of paper and quiet. The shelves stretch up into shadow. You've spent a lifetime here, collecting books. But these aren't ordinary books. The spine of one reads, "My partner's mood." Another, "My parents' approval." There's a heavy, ornate volume called "My Career Success," and a well-thumbed one titled, "What My Friends Think of Me." You have a whole section on future security, and a fragile, precious scroll called "My Spiritual Identity." You've built your entire sense of stability on these shelves. You lean against them. When they are orderly, you feel calm. When a book is out of place or goes missing, your whole world feels off-kilter. You believe this library is you. But what if you are not the library? What if you are the silent, spacious room that contains the library? The teachings we explore here, rooted in the profound wisdom of the Buddha, gently point to this shift. They don't ask you to burn the library down. They simply invite you to step back from the shelves. To stop leaning on them. And to discover that the room was always steady, always whole, regardless of which books are opened or closed today. Let me tell you a story from my early days, a story about a wall. I was living in a small apartment in a noisy city. Outside my window was a blank, gray wall of the adjacent building. I hated that wall. It felt like a symbol of everything wrong with my life, my lack of view, my lack of prospects, my feeling of being blocked. My peace depended entirely on not having to look at it. I would close the blinds, play music, anything to avoid its grim presence. I leaned on the absence of the wall for my comfort. One afternoon, during a heat wave, the power went out. No fan, no music. The silence was heavy. Out of sheer boredom and heat, I just sat on the floor and looked at the wall. Really looked. I stopped seeing it as a blockage and started seeing textures. The pattern of the concrete, the rust stain from an old pipe, the way the light changed across its surface as the sun moved. I watched a single pigeon land on its ledge, preen its feathers, and fly off. In that still, powerless hour, something shifted. The wall didn't change. But my relationship to it did. I wasn't leaning on my dislike of it anymore. I was just seeing it. And in that simple, unleaning seeing, the frustration dissolved. The wall became neutral. Interesting, even. My suffering hadn't been caused by the wall. It had been caused by my leaning on the story that the wall was an enemy to my happiness. The moment I stopped leaning on that story, the weight vanished. This is a tiny glimpse of the freedom the Buddha's path offers. It's not about changing the walls in your life. It's about changing your posture towards them. If this idea of finding steadiness not by changing the view, but by changing how you stand within yourself, speaks to you, then you have found a refuge here. Consider subscribing to Monk's Temple. By subscribing, you simply leave a lantern lit at the door of this quiet room, making it easier to find your way back whenever the noise of the world pulls you toward the shelves again. It's a gentle commitment to your own inner exploration. Now, let's go deeper into this posture of leaning. We often think of dependence as obvious neediness. But Buddhism shows us it's far more subtle, often disguised as virtue. It hides in plain sight, wearing the clothes of love, of loyalty, of being a good partner, friend, or child. We are culturally conditioned to believe that deep connection means two people holding each other up. But what if the healthiest connection is two people, each standing firmly on their own ground, simply choosing to be present with one another? When you depend on someone emotionally, you make them the curator of your inner library. You hand them the keys. Their smile becomes the light on your shelves. Their frown throws everything into darkness. You think, this is intimacy. But from the perspective of the Buddha's wisdom, this is a transfer of power. It is a quiet abdication of your own sovereign awareness. Think of your mind as a clear mountain lake. Its natural state is stillness, reflecting the sky with perfect clarity. Leaning is like constantly throwing stones into the lake to create ripples, because you've become addicted to the drama of the waves. You throw the stone of, "Do they love me?" and watch the ripples of anxiety spread. You throw the stone of, "Am I successful enough?" and stir up the silt of inadequacy. You may even ask others to throw stones for you, calling it deep conversation. But the clarity of the lake, your innate peace, can only be known when the throwing stops. When you allow the water to become still through simple, non-leaning observation. No one can be still for you. They can only stop throwing their own stones into your water. Your stillness is your own responsibility. This is not a cold truth. It is the most empowering truth you will ever encounter. I remember a master carpenter I apprenticed with for a brief time. He was teaching me to make a dovetail joint. My early attempts were wobbly, loose. I kept looking to him, my eyes pleading for him to fix it, to show me the trick. He would just say, "Your eye is in your head, not in mine." One day, frustrated, I blurted, "I just can't see the angle." He took the chisel from my hand, not to do it for me, but to place it back in my palm differently. "You are looking for the joint outside the wood," he said softly. "The joint is not out here. The seeing of the joint happens in here." He tapped my forehead gently. "Stop trying to borrow my sight. Let your own sight wake up." He walked away. And in that solitude, with no one to lean on, my attention sharpened. I stopped trying to replicate his movements and started feeling the grain of the wood, the balance of the tool in my hand. The click of understanding was internal, silent, and completely my own. The Buddha was such a teacher. He didn't offer his eyesight. He pointed relentlessly to the faculty of sight within us. The path is walked with your own eyes, your own legs, your own breath. This is why it can feel lonely. Not because you are abandoned, but because the awakening of your own awareness is an intimately personal event. This brings us to a powerful insight: much of what we call seeking support is actually a refined form of avoidance. It's the mind's clever strategy to avoid direct contact with a raw, unfiltered experience. When a wave of sadness rises, the mind's first impulse isn't to feel the sadness. It's to talk about the sadness. To text a friend, to analyze its origins, to share a meme about heartbreak. This feels productive. It feels like processing. But often, it's just a delay tactic. It's leaving the raw sensation of sadness to go into the conceptual world of story about sadness. The story is safer. It has a beginning, a middle, and the hope of an end. The raw sensation is just energy in the body. Heavy, perhaps, tinged with heat, located in the chest. It is impersonal. The story makes it personal, makes it my tragedy, and in doing so, gives the ego a role to play. Buddhism isn't interested in the role. It's interested in the truth beneath it. The truth is the direct sensation. Every time we escape into storytelling with others, we strengthen the neural pathway that says, direct experience is dangerous. You need a buffer. We train ourselves to be fragile. I learned this while learning to sail. My instructor was a weathered old man who spoke little. On my first solo attempt in a light breeze, a sudden gust heeled the boat over sharply. Panic seized me. I looked to the shore where he stood, wanting to shout for help, for instruction. He just watched. The boat was not in danger of capsizing, but my mind was. In that moment, with no rescue coming, I had a choice: panic and possibly tangle the sheets, or feel the fear in my body. The racing heart, the tight grip, and just do the next thing. I focused on the tiller, on the angle of the sail. I adjusted. The boat leveled. The fear didn't disappear, but it became a background noise, not the commander. When I came ashore, he said, "Good. You found the boat in yourself." I had been seeking support to avoid feeling fear. True support was the silence that forced me to find my own balance. The Buddhist teaching often feels like that silent old man on the shore. It doesn't shout instructions to save you from your fear. It trusts that within the silence of your own experience, you will find the balance that was always there. Let's continue. We arrive now at a subtle but essential turning on the path. It's the shift from effort to remembering. In the beginning, there is necessary work. It is like learning to walk on a slack line. Your entire being is concentrated, muscles tense, focus razor sharp on not falling. You are putting an immense effort to find balance. But as you practice, something changes. The balance is not something you do anymore. It becomes something you are. You step onto the line, and the body remembers. The micro adjustments happen without conscious thought. If you start to overthink it, to try to force the balance, you'll wobble and fall. The skilled slackliner has not added something, they have surrendered to a knowing that is deeper than thought. The Buddhist path matures in the same way. Early on, we apply effort, we commit to meditation, we practice restraint, we notice our attachments. This builds the stability of the rebuilt self, the shelter. But if we cling to that effort, it becomes its own form of leaning. We start leaning on our discipline, on our spiritual identity, on our progress. The effort itself becomes a spike in the tree. True, mature freedom is sustained not by gripping tighter, but by a gentle, continuous remembering. Remembering to notice. Remembering to come back. Remembering the feeling of the mind when it is not leaning. This is not a memory of a concept, it's a somatic memory, like the body's memory of how to ride a bike. You don't think, now left pedal, now right. You just ride. In meditation, you don't think, now be non-attached. You simply notice the breath, and in that noticing, the grasping mind naturally settles. You remember the sky-like nature of awareness, and the clouds of thought lose their power to convince you they are solid ground. This remembering is the essence of mindfulness. It is a soft alertness, a kind of inner hospitality that welcomes whatever arises without getting up to rearrange the furniture. I learned about this from watching an old watchmaker. His shop was a tiny, quiet space filled with the smell of oil and metal. He would repair intricate antique timepieces. I asked him once how he could work with such patience on such tiny, complex mechanisms. He said, "I do not work on the watch. I become still, and then my hands are used by the stillness to align what is out of alignment." He wasn't applying forceful effort with his tweezers. He would first become utterly quiet, his breathing almost vanishing. Then, his movements would become fluid, precise, and seemingly effortless. He was remembering a state of unified attention, and from that place, the work happened through him. Our inner work is the same. We are not trying to force the gears of our mind to mesh perfectly. We are becoming still, and from that stillness, the natural intelligence of awareness realigns what is out of balance. The practice is the remembering of stillness, not the manipulation of parts. This remembering is what allows us to meet life with directness. When you stop leaning, you stop interpreting. The filter of self-concern dissolves. Experience becomes immediate, almost shockingly simple. A cool breeze isn't a nice breeze that makes me feel relaxed. It's a sensation of coolness on skin. The sound of rain isn't cozy or gloomy. It's a pattern of soft tapping. This direct perception is not impoverished, it is incredibly rich. It's the difference between reading a restaurant review and tasting the food. The review is all concepts, comparisons, and stories. The taste is the direct, wordless reality. Most of us live in the review. We experience the world through a thick layer of commentary. This is good for me. This is what I've always wanted. This proves I'm not good enough. This commentary is the architecture of leaning. It's the self trying to position itself in relation to everything. When that effort ceases, the world appears fresh, new, and intimate. You are no longer a critic at the play of your life. You are immersed in the sensory experience of it. Let me tell you a story about directness, about my grandmother's hands. In her last years, her memory faded. The stories of her life, the identities of mother, wife, cook, all those shelves in her library began to empty. It was easy to see this as a tragedy, a loss of self. But something else emerged. She became profoundly present to simple things. She would sit for an hour, just feeling the texture of a wool blanket, her fingers tracing the weave with a look of deep wonder on her face. She would taste a single blueberry as if it were the first and last berry in the universe. There was no story attached. No, this is my favorite blanket from my trip to Scotland. No, I used to make the best blueberry pies. There was just blanket. Just blueberry. Just sensation. In her forgetting, she had accidentally stumbled into a profound state of non-leaning. She was no longer leaning on her memories or her roles to tell her who she was. She was simply experiencing. And in that direct experience, there was a peace so palpable it would quiet the entire room. She wasn't seeking freedom, she had, through the strange path of loss, fallen into the freedom of the direct moment. Our practice is to arrive at that same freedom not through loss, but through letting go. This brings us to a profound implication: when you stop leaning, compassion becomes clean. This is a critical point. Often, our helping, our caring for others, is secretly mixed with a need to be needed, to feel good about ourselves, to fix our own unease by fixing someone else. It's a transaction. We give comfort, secretly expecting gratitude or a change in the other person that will make us more comfortable. This is compassion with strings attached. It's leaning on the other person's suffering to stabilize our own identity as a helper. When you stop leaning internally, this mix clears. You see suffering, and a response arises, to offer a hand, a word, a silence, but it is not tangled with your own need for a particular outcome. Your inner boat is steady, so you can truly see the person in the water, not your own reflection in their struggle. The action is precise, appropriate, and free. And when it's done, it's done. There's no residual need for them to be better, or to thank you. This is the compassion the Buddha embodied. It was limitless because it came from a source that was not seeking to limit anything, not even its own sense of virtue. I saw this clean compassion in a nurse in a hospice ward where I volunteered. Her name was Ilara. She moved with a calm that seemed to lower the temperature of anxiety in any room. One day, a family was gathered around their dying father, anguished, arguing about treatment decisions, radiating fear and grief. Ilara entered. She didn't offer platitudes. She didn't try to fix the family dynamics. She simply went to the bedside, checked the man's fore with a touch so gentle it was barely there, then turned to the family and said very softly, "It's very hard to see him like this." That was all. She wasn't leaning on them to calm down, or to validate her nursing skills. She was standing in the raw truth of the moment with them, without fear. She was a steady presence that didn't ask anything from their drama. And somehow, her non-leaning presence became a space where they could, for a moment, stop leaning on their own anger and fear. They quieted. Her compassion wasn't an action, it was a quality of her being. She was able to offer it because she wasn't secretly using the situation to shore up her own emotional state. This is the power of a heart that doesn't lean. Now, let's weave these threads together into the fabric of daily life. This freedom, this non-leaning, is not a remote mountain peak experience. It is meant to be lived in the marketplace, in the traffic jam, in the difficult conversation. It's here that we encounter the final, gentle discipline, the continuity of remembering through everything. The mind's habit of leaning is ancient and deep. Stress, surprise, and strong emotion will tug at that old habit. In those moments, the practice is not to achieve a perfect state of detachment. The practice is simply to remember to notice. Ah! Here is fear. I feel the leaning impulse. The mind wants to call someone, to fix this, to control. Just that recognition creates a tiny, crucial space. In that space, you have a choice. Not a dramatic choice, but a subtle one. To follow the impulse into the old story, or to simply stay with the raw sensation of fear in the body, to breathe with the tightening in the chest, to be the sky for that storm cloud. Each time you choose the sky, you deepen the memory of freedom. You wear the neural pathway a little smoother. It becomes the path of least resistance. Think of it as walking through a familiar, overgrown field to get to a clear stream. At first, you bushwhack, creating a new trail. It's hard work. That's the initial effort. Once the trail is established, you still have to choose to walk it. That's the remembering. But the more you walk it, the clearer and easier it becomes, until one day, you realize you're just walking to the stream without thinking about the path at all. The freedom is the stream. The practice is just walking the clear path home. Let's continue. We've spoken of the sky holding the weather. Let's go deeper into the nature of this sky. This awareness that is our true home. We spend our lives preoccupied with the clouds, their shapes, their threats, their promises of rain or clearing. We praise the fluffy white ones and dread the dark storm ones. Our entire emotional life is a weather report. We lean on the hope for good weather and the fear of bad. But the Buddha's radical invitation is to turn your attention from the clouds to the space that holds them. To notice the sky itself. The sky does not do anything. It does not cling to the pleasant clouds or push away the storms. It is simply the open, allowing presence in which all weather systems arise, play out, and dissolve. Your awareness is that sky. It is already vast, already clear, already undisturbed. You cannot make it more vast. You can only recognize it. This recognition is subtle. It's not a loud, aha, moment. It's more like the gradual dawning of realization when you've been looking for your glasses everywhere, only to find they've been on your head the whole time. The search itself was the obstruction. The seeking for peace, for freedom, for stability, that frantic looking outward, is what keeps us from feeling the perfect, unshakable peace of the awareness that is already looking. The path in Monk's Temple is not about building a better telescope to search the heavens. It's about turning the telescope around and realizing you are the infinite space you've been trying to see. I want to share a story about a well. In a village where I lived for a time, there was an old, stone well at the center of town. It was deep, and its water was famously sweet and cold. For generations, people would lower their buckets on a rope, haul up the water, and carry it home. Over time, pipes were laid to every house. Tap water arrived. It was convenient, but it tasted of chlorine and metal. One by one, people stopped going to the well. They leaned on the convenience of the pipe. The well became a relic, covered by a wooden lid. Years passed. Then, a great drought came. The reservoir feeding the pipes ran dry. Panic set in. People had forgotten how to draw water. In their desperation, someone remembered the old well. They rushed to it, heaved open the creaking lid, and lowered a bucket. It sank deep, deep down, and then, with a soft splash, struck water. They hauled it up, and there it was, the same sweet, cold, life-giving water that had always been there, waiting in the deep, quiet dark. Our leaning on external things, people, status, entertainment, is like relying on the piped water. It's convenient, but it has a taste of impermanence, of not quite right. When those pipes run dry, as they inevitably will, we panic. The practice of Buddhism is remembering the well. It is the daily discipline of going to that quiet, central place within yourself, lowering the bucket of your attention into the depths of your own being, and drawing up the water of pure awareness. That water has always been there. It never runs dry. But you have to remember it exists, and you have to do the work of drawing it up yourself. No one can drink for you. This is why the path is intimate and solitary. No one can give you a drink from your own well. They can point to it. They can say, "There is water here." They can even show you their own full bucket. But the tasting, the drawing, that is your direct experience. This solitude is not emptiness. It is intimacy with the source. When you sit in meditation and feel restless, bored, or anxious, you are at the well, fidgeting with the bucket, complaining about the rope. The instruction is simple. Lower the bucket. Bring your attention back to the breath, to a sensation, to the simple fact of being aware. That is the bucket touching the water. The sweetness you taste in moments of deep calm, of effortless presence, is the water. It convinces you more than any teaching ever could. Now, let's apply this to a very common, very sticky form of leaning, the leaning on understanding. We are creatures of mind. We believe if we can just understand why we suffer, we will be free. So we read books, listen to talks, like this one, accumulate psychological and spiritual concepts. We build a library of understanding. And we lean on it. I know this is impermanence, we say, as we white-knuckle through a loss. I know this is just a sensation, we think, as we resist pain. This is a subtle trap. Conceptual understanding is a map. Direct experience is the territory. You can memorize a map of Paris, know every arrondissement, the location of every café. But until you stand on the banks of the Seine, feel the cobblestones under your feet, and smell the air, you do not know Paris. Leaning on the map is not the same as walking the city. Buddhism values wisdom, prajna, over knowledge. Wisdom is the map coming alive in your direct footsteps. It is the aha that is felt in the bones, not stored in the brain. I fell into this trap for years. I could talk eloquently about non-self, about emptiness, about the causes of suffering. I leaned on this knowledge as my spiritual identity. It made me feel secure, intelligent, advanced. Then, I lost someone very dear to me. The grief was a physical avalanche. In that raw, shattered place, all my concepts were useless. Saying, "This is impermanence," to the howling void in my chest was like offering a paper umbrella in a hurricane. My library of understanding burned down in the fire of that direct experience. And in the ashes, something else became clear. There were no words, no concepts. There was just the terrible, beautiful, undeniable reality of love and loss. And in the center of that storm, when I stopped trying to understand it and just let it be what it was, a different kind of peace emerged. It was not the peace of comprehension. It was the peace of surrender to the incomprehensible. That was wisdom. It was not leaned upon, it was lived. The Buddha's teachings are fingers pointing at the moon. Do not confuse the finger for the moon. Do not lean on the finger. Use it to guide your gaze, then look directly at the reality itself. This is where our practice meets art, meets true creativity. An artist does not lean on the rules of perspective to make a painting breathe. They learn the rules, then they forget them. They enter a state of direct engagement with the canvas, the paint, the emerging image. The great works come from that unleaned, immediate connection. Our life is our canvas. When we stop leaning on the rulebook of how life should be, we start to paint from the direct experience of what is. Our responses become creative, authentic, fresh. We are no longer coloring inside lines drawn by others' expectations or our own past conditioning. I knew a potter who worked with a kick wheel, his hands guided by something deeper than thought. He said his best pots were made when he was not there. When he stopped trying to make a good pot, stopped leaning on his skill or his reputation, and simply became the conduit between the clay and the fire, the pot would then have a life of its own, an asymmetry that was perfect, a presence that was undeniable. He called it, getting out of the way. That is our spiritual task, to get out of the way of our own innate wisdom. To stop leaning on the idea of being a potter, and to simply let the pot of this moment be shaped by the hands of awareness. This brings us to a tender point, dealing with the times we fail, the times we fall back into leaning. It will happen. You will find yourself, once again, anxiously checking your phone for a reply. You will find your mood plummeting because of a coworker's comment. You will feel the old ache of needing to be validated. This is not a cause for condemnation. It is the most important part of the training. This is where remembering becomes compassion. When you notice you have picked up the bag of stones again, you have a golden opportunity. The old pattern would be to berate yourself, I failed. I'm not spiritual at all. That is just more leaning on a negative self-concept. The new way, the way of gentle remembering, is to simply notice with curiosity, look at this. The leaning mind is here. How interesting. What does this feel like in the body? What is the story it's telling? This turns the failure into the path itself. The moment of noticing is the moment of freedom. The bag drops again. This is why Buddhism speaks of beginner's mind. Each moment is a fresh opportunity to notice, to remember, to come home. The path is not linear. It's a spiral. You keep coming back to the same lesson, but each time from a place of slightly deeper understanding, slightly less self-judgment. Think of training a puppy. You are teaching it to walk on a leash without pulling. The puppy will pull. That's its nature. Your job is not to yell at the puppy, but to patiently, consistently, stop walking when it pulls. Wait for the slack to return in the leash, then continue. Over and over. The mind is that puppy. Leaning is the pull. Meditation and daily mindfulness are the gentle, consistent pause. You notice the pull, the leaning thought, you stop fueling it with attention, you pause, you wait for the slack, the return to awareness, and then you continue. It is endless, patient, loving repetition. There is no final point where the puppy never pulls. There is just a well-trained puppy that walks peacefully by your side more and more of the time. Your peace is not in the puppy's perfect behavior. Your peace is in your patient, unwavering commitment to the training. So, as we walk this spiral path together, remember, the goal is not to never lean again. The goal is to shorten the time between leaning and remembering. To make the space of clear, unleaned awareness your default home, and the leaning a brief visit to an old, familiar neighborhood that you no longer wish to live in. Each time you remember, you reinforce the pathways home. You drink from your own well. You taste your own freedom. Let's continue. There is a profound simplicity that emerges when the habit of leaning weakens. Life begins to feel less like a complex negotiation and more like a natural occurrence. You start to notice a fundamental law: suffering is not in the event, but in the argument with the event. The event is just a happening. A change. A piece of weather moving through the sky of your life. The argument is the leaning. It's the inner posture that says, this should not be happening to me, or I need this to keep happening for me to be okay. That argument creates friction, heat, and pain. When you stop leaning, you don't necessarily stop the events. You stop the argument. You may still say, ouch, if you stub your toe, but you don't then spend the next hour building a case about your clumsiness, the injustice of the furniture placement, and how this is a sign of your terrible day. The sensation arises and passes, and you move on. The argument is what creates the lasting drama, the story of my suffering. The Buddha's teaching on the second noble truth points directly to this. The cause of suffering, dukkha, is tanha, thirst, craving. But this craving isn't just for pleasure, it's also craving for things to be other than they are. It's the craving for a different weather pattern than the one presently in your sky. This craving is the engine of leaning. It's the force that pushes you to look outside for a different forecast. Freedom is the end of that craving. Not because you get the weather you want, but because you lose interest in the futile argument with the weather. You become interested, instead, in the sky. I learned about this from a farmer I met in the Midwest. His livelihood was entirely at the mercy of the weather. A hailstorm could wipe out his crop in minutes. A drought could bake his fields to dust. I asked him how he could live with such uncertainty, such potential for loss. He looked out over his fields, a sea of green under a huge sky, and said, I used to fight it. I'd curse the rain when I needed sun, and pray for rain when it was dry. I was miserable. Then I realized I was just a man shaking his fist at the sky. Now, I do my work. I plant the best seeds I can. I tend the fields. The rest is not my business. The sky does what it does. Some years are bounty, some years are loss. But my peace is in the tending, not in the harvest. He had stopped leaning on a specific outcome. His well-being was no longer chained to the uncontrollable weather. His peace was found in the integrity of his own work. The tending, the showing up, the awareness he brought to each row of plants. That is the epitome of a life not leaned. Your inner work is your field. Your attention is your tending. The outcomes of life are the weather. Your peace is found in the quality of your tending, not in the harvest you cannot control. This changes our relationship with fear. Most fear is the anticipation of a future event and the simultaneous leaning on the wish that it not happen. It is a preemptive argument with reality. What if I get sick? What if they leave? What if I fail? The mind spins scenarios and then leans hard on the desperate, futile hope that they won't occur. This is exhausting. It's like bracing for a punch that may never come. When you stop leaning, fear doesn't necessarily vanish, but it transforms. It becomes a simple signal in the present moment, there is uncertainty here. You feel the clench in the gut, the quickening of the pulse. But instead of leaning into the story of the feared future, you can simply acknowledge the signal. Ah! Fear is here. You feel its texture in the body. You breathe with it. You don't argue with its presence. You don't try to make it go away by seeking reassurance. You let it be a passing weather system. By not leaning on the fear, by not feeding the story, you allow it to arise, peak, and dissipate on its own. You discover you can hold the sensation of fear without being consumed by the drama of fear. This is true courage. It is not the absence of fear. It is the presence of awareness that is larger than fear. Let me tell you a story about a bridge, a different one. This was a narrow, swinging footbridge over a deep canyon. To cross it, you had to walk one person at a time. The rule was simple: look straight ahead at the far post. Do not look down at the churning river below. Do not look at the swinging of the bridge. Fix your gaze on the stable point ahead and walk. I watched person after person cross. Those who fixated on the post walked across steadily, almost calmly. Those who glanced down at the river would freeze, gasp, grip the cables until their knuckles turned white, and often have to be helped or even carried across. Their problem wasn't the bridge's stability, it was the same for everyone. Their problem was where they placed their attention. Leaning is looking down into the churning river of external circumstances, other people's actions, the stock market, societal approval, the uncertain future. It induces panic. The practice is to fix your inner gaze on the stable post of your own aware presence. That post is always there. It is the knowing itself, the consciousness that is reading these words. When your attention is rooted there, you can walk across the swinging bridge of life's changes without freezing. The bridge still sways. The river still churns. But you are not leaning on the bridge's stillness, which is an illusion, you are grounded in the stillness of your own focused awareness. This points to a powerful tool, questioning the lean. When you feel that familiar tension, that reaching, that sense of something being off unless a condition is met, pause. Ask inwardly, what am I leaning on right now? The answer might surprise you. It could be, I am leaning on my partner to be in a good mood so I can feel secure. Or, I am leaning on this project's success to feel worthy. Or, I am leaning on silence being peaceful, and this noise is disturbing my lean. Just naming it shines the light of awareness on the mechanism. And often, in that light, the absurdity of the demand becomes clear. You see that you are asking an impermanent, uncontrollable world to be a permanent, controllable crutch. The seeing itself loosens the grip. I used this questioning during a period of intense creative block. I would sit down to write and feel only emptiness and rising panic. The thought was, I need inspiration to arrive, or I am a failure. I felt myself leaning, desperately, on the muse. One day, instead of fighting the block, I asked the question. What am I leaning on? The answer was clear, I am leaning on a feeling of inspiration to do the work. I am leaning on a result to validate the process. I saw it. And in that seeing, I gently let go of the demand. I thought, okay. No inspiration. Just the task. I set a timer for 20 minutes and decided I would simply sit with the emptiness, type nonsense if I had to, but not get up. I wasn't leaning on a good outcome anymore. I was just present with the task. And somewhere around minute 15, the leaning stopped, the inner argument ceased, and words began to flow. Not from a mystical muse, but from the quiet space that opened up when I stopped demanding that the space be filled. The work came from the well, not the pipe. This approach transforms our relationship with time. The leaning mind is almost always time traveling. It leans on the past for identity, this is who I am because of what happened, and on the future for salvation, I will be happy when. It avoids the present because the present, in its raw immediacy, offers nothing to lean on. It simply is. When you stop leaning, you fall out of time travel and land, with a gentle thud, in the present moment. This moment has no story. It has sensation, perception, awareness. It is the only place where life is actually happening. It is the only place where you can actually stand without a crutch, because here, you are fully resourced. You have your breath. You have your senses. You have the knowing of it all. The past is a memory happening now. The future is a thought happening now. All your power is in this now. A life not leaned is a life lived in deepening intimacy with this eternal present. Imagine an old, stone staircase, worn smooth in the center by centuries of feet. When you walk, you don't lean to the left or right. You find your balance in the center of each step. You don't walk on the edge, clinging to the railing, the past, or straining toward the step ahead, the future. You meet each step as it comes, centered, present, complete. This is walking the path. Step by step by step. The destination is not somewhere else. The destination is the quality of your presence on this step, right now. When you walk this way, you find that freedom isn't a place you arrive at in the future. It's the manner of your walking. Let's continue. There is a quiet revolution that happens when you sincerely begin to withdraw the energy of leaning. It's a revolution not against the world, but within your own perception. You start to see that the world you thought was pressing in on you was, in fact, being pulled in by your own leaning. It's like the difference between standing still in a river and leaning into the current. When you lean, you feel the full force of the water against you. It feels like an assault, a pressure you must resist. When you stand upright, centered in your own balance, the same water flows around you. You feel its movement, its coolness, its power, but it is not opposing you. It is simply flowing, and you are simply standing within the flow. The suffering was never in the river. It was in the posture of resistance, the lean against the inevitable. The Buddha's teaching on right view begins this revolution. It starts with seeing things as they are, not as we demand them to be. Leaning is the ultimate expression of wrong view. It is the view that says, my happiness is out there, in that person, in that condition. Right view corrects this. It sees that happiness, peace, stability, these are not external commodities to be acquired or conditions to be met. They are innate qualities of a mind that is not at war with reality. They are the natural state of the unleaned, ungrasping awareness. When you see this, even intellectually at first, the entire project of your life subtly shifts. The goal is no longer to arrange the river to your liking. The goal is to find your balance in the midst of its flow. I witnessed this shift in a friend who lost everything in a fire, home, possessions, mementos. In the first raw days, there was shock and grief. But as the weeks passed, I watched something unexpected unfold. Freed from the weight of a lifetime of objects, each one something to care for, insure, clean, and worry about, a lightness came over him. He said something I'll never forget, I spent my life leaning on all that stuff to tell me who I was. The book said I was intellectual. The art said I was cultured. The furniture said I was established. Now it's all ash. And I'm still here. Who am I? I don't know yet. But for the first time, I feel like I might get to meet myself. The fire had violently removed every external thing he could lean on. In that terrifying emptiness, he was being introduced to the bare awareness that remained. It was a brutal grace. Our practice is a gentler, more deliberate fire. We sit, and in the stillness, we let the attachments, the identities, the silent demands, be seen for what they are, fuel. And we choose, breath by breath, not to feed the flame of clinging. We allow a different kind of fire, the clarifying fire of wisdom, to burn away the leanings, leaving only the essential, indestructible ground of being. This ground of being has a quality of profound okayness. It's not a cheerful, optimistic, everything is great feeling. It's a deep, wordless settling into the fact that in this exact moment, regardless of content, you are aware, and that awareness is fundamentally unthreatened. A thought may be painful. An emotion may be intense. A circumstance may be difficult. But the space in which it all appears, your consciousness, is not damaged, not diminished. It is like a screen in a movie theater. A tragic scene plays out. The screen holds the image, but is not stained by it. When the scene changes to a comedy, the screen doesn't become happy. It simply presents the next image. Leaning is getting so absorbed in a tragic scene that you believe the screen itself is in agony. Freedom is the gradual remembering that you are the screen, not the movie. This okayness is always present. You don't create it. You stop obscuring it with the drama of leaning. Let me tell you a story about learning to listen. Not to people, but to silence. In my youth, I trained for a time with a master of a traditional flute. The first months were not about playing, but about listening. He would have me sit for hours in a bamboo grove. Listen to the wind through the bamboo, he would say. That is the first note. I would sit, impatient, hearing only wind. Then, slowly, I began to distinguish tones, a low hum here, a high whistle there. Then I began to hear the spaces between the tones. The silence that cradled the sound. He said, the flute does not make the music. The player does not make the music. The music is already here, in the silence and the wind. The flute is just a tool to remind people of the music they have forgotten how to hear. Our leaning is the impatient noise we make trying to create a song we think is missing. Our practice is learning to sit in the bamboo grove of our own being, listening past the wind of our thoughts, to the silent, vibrant music that is always already here. The music of pure awareness. When you hear that, you realize you don't need to lean on any external instrument to play the song of your life. You are the song, and the listening, all at once. This brings us to a nuanced aspect of the path, the role of community, of the Sangha. If the path is so internal and solitary, why be with others at all? This is where the metaphor of the bamboo grove is perfect. The bamboos grow together. Their roots intertwine underground, providing mutual stability in storms. Yet, each bamboo stands alone, reaching for the sky on its own stalk. They do not lean on each other. They stand together, independently. A spiritual community, like the one we foster here at Monk's Temple, is meant to be a bamboo grove. We are here to remind each other of the music. To point each other back to the listening. To provide the gentle, supportive context of shared intention. But we cannot listen for one another. We cannot stand for one another. The greatest gift we can offer is the example of our own uprightness, our own attentive listening. This protects the community from becoming a crutch, a place where we go to outsource our inner work. Instead, it becomes a sacred grove where each individual learns to hear their own unique note within the universal symphony. I experienced this in a group meditation retreat. We sat in silence for days. There was no talking, no eye contact. Yet, the sense of profound connection was palpable. It wasn't a connection of shared stories or mutual support in the usual sense. It was the connection of shared intention. The silent, collective commitment to facing oneself. In that hall, with 50 others each doing their own impossible, solitary work, I felt a strength that was not borrowed. It was resonant. It was the sound of 50 people remembering not to lean, all at once. The energy in the room was not one of dependency, but of dignified, mutual solitude. That is the Sangha at its best. It doesn't hold you up. It honors your capacity to stand, and in that honoring, strengthens your resolve. As we near the later stages of this exploration, the practice becomes increasingly subtle. The big, obvious leanings, on a partner, a job, an addiction, may have softened. Now we encounter the micro-leanings. The leaning on a comfortable routine. The leaning on a positive self-image as a mindful person. The leaning on the pleasure of a quiet mind, and the aversion to a noisy one. This is where the refining fire burns brightest. It asks, can you be free without any props at all? Even the prop of feeling free. This is the invitation into choiceless awareness. Awareness that does not pick and choose. That does not lean toward peace and away from chaos. It simply is awake to what is. In this space, the last vestige of the lever, the one who was doing the leaning, dissolves. There is just the flow of experience, and the knowing of the flow, inseparable. Action happens, but it is not driven by a needy self. It arises spontaneously from wisdom and compassion, like a clear spring bubbling from the ground. This is not a passive state. It is dynamically engaged, but without the friction of self-concern. I'll close this part with a story about a knife. A master chef visited our monastery to prepare a meal. We gathered in the kitchen to watch him work. His movements were a beautiful, efficient dance. But what struck me most was his relationship with his knife. It was an extension of his hand. He didn't use the knife with effort. He and the knife together performed the act of slicing. There was no separation, no, I am cutting this carrot. There was just cutting. The carrot, the knife, the hand, the awareness, all one event. Afterward, someone asked him the secret to his knife skills. He picked up the knife and held it loosely in his open palm. The secret, he said, is to not hold the knife. Let the knife hold itself. Your hand is just the space where the cutting happens. This is the ultimate end of leaning. You are not holding your life together. You are the open, aware space in which life, with all its cutting, its blending, its bitter and sweet flavors, simply happens. The knife of experience is not a threat or a tool to be clutched. It is just another aspect of the ever-moving, ever-creating reality appearing in the boundless kitchen of your awareness. When you stop leaning, you become that open space. And in that space, everything belongs, and nothing needs to be held. Let's continue. We've traveled from the forest with its bag of stones to the silent flute in the bamboo grove. We've seen how leaning creates the very pressure it seeks to avoid. Now, let's explore the landscape that appears when that pressure vanishes. It's a landscape of intimacy without fusion. This is one of the most beautiful fruits of the path. Normally, we think intimacy means two things merging, leaning into each other so completely that boundaries blur. We call this love. But Buddhism points to a different kind of love, born not from need but from fullness. It is the intimacy of two clear windows facing the same view. Each window is separate, distinct, with its own frame and its own slight imperfections in the glass. But because both are clean and clear, they offer the same unobstructed view of the sky. They don't need to become one window. Their clarity allows for a shared perception that is deeper than any merger. When you stop leaning, you become that clear window. Your inner peace is no longer contingent on another window's cleanliness. You can appreciate another's clarity, but you are not desperate for them to clean themselves so you can see better. You can even be near a window that is dirty or cracked, and while you may feel compassion for its condition, your own clarity remains. Your view is not obscured. This is how you can love without being drained, be close without being lost. You relate from the stable ground of your own clear seeing. I saw this embodied in two monks who had been friends for 60 years. They shared a small hermitage. They would meditate together, eat in silence, tend the garden side by side. Their communication was often wordless. One day, one of them became very ill. The healthy friend cared for him, cooking, cleaning, sitting by his bedside, with a tenderness that was moving. But there was no desperation in it, no clinging. When the sick monk was in pain, his friend would simply place a hand on his shoulder and breathe with him, his own face calm. He wasn't leaning on the hope that his friend would get better to relieve his own sorrow. He was fully present with the reality of the illness, the pain, the impending death. He was the clear window to his friend's suffering. When his friend finally passed, he grieved. He wept. But the grief was clean, like rain washing a pane of glass. It was not mixed with panic, self-pity, or the terror of being alone. He had never leaned on his friend for his own stability, so the loss, while profound, did not destroy his foundation. Their intimacy had been in the shared view, not in using each other as structural support. That is love without clinging. This clarity allows us to reframe one of life's greatest challenges, betrayal and hurt. When you are leaning on someone, their betrayal isn't just a painful action, it is an architectural collapse. It feels like the ground has vanished because you built your floor on their promised support. The pain is magnified 1,000-fold by the weight of your own dependence. When you are not leaning, betrayal is still painful. It is the pain of seeing unkindness, of broken trust, of harm. But it is not catastrophic. It is a storm passing through your sky. Your inner ground, your own integrity and awareness, remains intact. You can feel the hurt without becoming the hurt. You can say, "This action was wrong," without your entire sense of self crumbling. You can protect yourself or walk away without your decision being fueled by reactive rage or crumbling neediness. It comes from clarity. This is how you break cycles of pain. You stop building your house on ground owned by others. Let me share a hard lesson from my own past. I once trusted a mentor implicitly. I leaned on his wisdom, his approval, his vision for my path. When I discovered he had been deliberately misleading me and others for personal gain, the collapse was total. It wasn't just him I lost my sense of direction, my trust in my own judgment, my spiritual footing. For months, I was adrift in bitterness. My leaning had been so complete that when he fell, I had nothing of my own to stand on. The turning point came when I stopped asking, how could he do this, and started asking, why did I give him the power to do this to me? That question led me inward, to the raw, unleaned place within that had been there all along, waiting. I had to rebuild my relationship with that inner ground, not with a new external guide. It was a painful but necessary burnishing of my own window. Now, I can be grateful for the lesson, though not the action. He was the fire that burned away my need to lean on a teacher. The Buddha said, "Be a lamp unto yourself." Sometimes, the wind that blows out your borrowed candle is the very thing that forces you to find the lamp within. This inward turn reveals another layer, the difference between solitude and loneliness. Loneliness is the ache of the leaning mind when its support is absent. It is the feeling of the addict in withdrawal. Solitude is the conscious, abiding in your own company without that ache. It is the rich, full silence of the well when you are drawing from it. Loneliness says, I am missing something. Solitude says, I am complete here. You can feel lonely in a crowd if you are leaning on the crowd for validation. You can feel profoundly connected in solitude if you are resting in your own aware presence. The practice transforms loneliness into solitude by patiently, repeatedly, returning attention to the fullness of the present moment, where nothing is missing. I remember a winter I spent almost entirely alone in a remote cabin. The first 2 weeks were a torrent of loneliness. The mind thrashed like a fish on a line. I missed conversation, connection, recognition. But as I persisted in my meditation and simple routines, the thrashing slowed. The loneliness didn't disappear, it changed. It became a quiet, hollow feeling in the chest. Instead of trying to fill it, I just let it be there. I observed it. And in that observation, something shifted. The hollow feeling began to feel less like a void and more like a chamber. An echo chamber. And in that chamber, I began to hear the subtle sounds of my own life, the rhythm of my heart, the flow of my breath, the whisper of conscious thought. The loneliness had been the noise of my resistance to being alone with myself. When the resistance ceased, the loneliness revealed its true name, solitude. And in that solitude, I met a companionship more stable than any human relationship, the companionship of being itself. From this place of grounded solitude, your activity in the world changes. You begin to understand right action. Action that is not driven by the need to get something, to prove something, or to escape something. It is action that arises naturally from clear perception of what is needed in the moment. It is the action of the bamboo bending in the wind, not resisting, not clinging, simply responding with flexibility to the present conditions. This action is efficient, compassionate, and free of the exhausting baggage of personal agenda. You do what is right because it is right, not because you need it to work out in your favor. Think of a master archer. The novice leans on the target. His entire being is strained toward the bullseye. His grip is tight, his breath held, his mind shouting, "I must hit it." This leaning guarantees a miss. The master does not lean on the target. His attention is on his posture, his breath, the feel of the bow, the alignment of the arrow. He and the bow become one system. The release happens when the system is in perfect balance. The arrow flies true not because he aimed at the target, but because he became the embodiment of the shot. The target is simply where the arrow goes when all leaning ceases. Your life is the bow. Your awareness is the archer. The world is the target. Stop leaning on outcomes, on results, on targets. Tend to the alignment of your own being, your intention, your attention, your integrity. Right action will release from that alignment, and its effects will be true, regardless of where the arrow lands. This is the essence of karma in its deepest sense. Not a system of reward and punishment, but the immutable law that actions born from a leaning, grasping mind create tangled, suffering results. Actions born from a clear, unleaned mind create harmony, clarity, and freedom, regardless of their external success or failure. You are freed from the anxiety of results because your peace was never invested in them to begin with. You did your part with clarity, the universe will handle the rest. As we near the end of our exploration, remember this: the entire journey from leaning to freedom is a homecoming. You are not acquiring a new state. You are shedding an old, exhausting habit. You are not becoming someone else. You are remembering who you have always been, beneath the layers of grasping. The peace you seek has never been absent. It has just been overlooked, because you were looking for it in the wrong direction, out there, in the reflections of others, in the conditions of the world. Turn your gaze around. Feel the awareness that is reading these words. That is it. That is the untouched sky, the clear window, the still well, the steady ground. It requires no support. It is support itself. Everything else, the thoughts, the feelings, the relationships, the successes and failures, are the ever-changing weather within it. You can enjoy the weather. You can dance in the rain and bask in the sun. But you no longer need to. Your fulfillment is not conditional upon the forecast. You are home. And home is wherever you are, whenever you remember to stop leaning. Let's complete our journey. We have walked from the forest to the library, from the well to the sky, from the clear window to the master's bow. We've seen that leaning is the covert architect of nearly all our suffering. And we've felt the whispers of the freedom that comes when that lean begins to soften. Now, we arrive at the simplest and perhaps the most challenging truth of all: this is not a one-time achievement. It is a moment-to-moment remembering. The mind that has spent a lifetime leaning is like a river that has carved a deep canyon. Even after the rains stop, the water will naturally flow into that deep channel out of sheer habit. Your work is not to demolish the canyon. Your work is, each time you find yourself rushing down that old channel, to gently, patiently, redirect the flow of your attention back to the open plane of present moment awareness. There is no finish line where you are declared leaning free. There is only the increasing ease with which you notice the old posture, and the decreasing amount of time you spend entranced by it. Freedom is in the noticing. Each time you notice, I am leaning again, and you choose not to follow the thought, not to feed the story, not to tighten the grip, in that very moment, you are free. The bondage was in the unconsciousness. The freedom is in the wakefulness. So, we end not with a grand conclusion, but with a gentle beginning. A beginning that repeats itself with every breath. Let's bring this all home with one final metaphor, one last story, and a direct invitation into your own experience. Imagine you are in a boat on a foggy lake at dawn. The fog is so thick you can't see the shore. You feel disoriented, anxious. You start to row frantically, leaning into each stroke, desperate to find land, to find something solid. This frantic rowing is the leaning life. You are using all your energy, creating splashes and waves, but you have no idea if you're going in circles or towards safety. Now imagine you stop. You simply stop rowing. You let the oars rest in the water. At first, the silence is terrifying. The fog is still there. But as you sit in stillness, something happens. The little waves your frantic rowing created begin to settle. The surface of the lake becomes like glass. And in that perfect stillness, you begin to see reflections in the water beneath you. You see the faint, inverted image of the reeds along a shore. You see the mirrored shape of a tree. You realize you are not lost in a void. You are resting on a perfect mirror that is showing you exactly where you are. The guidance was always there, but you couldn't see it while you were churning the water with your effort. The shore of your own true nature has been reflecting back at you all along. The practice is to stop rowing. To let the mind settle. And to look into the still water of your own awareness. Everything you need to know is reflected there. Now, for our final story, a true one from the Zen tradition, retold in my own words. A young, earnest student approached a great master. "Master," he said, "I have been studying diligently for years. I have read all the sutras. I meditate for hours each day. Please, tell me. What is the essence of the Buddha's teaching? What is enlightenment?" The old master looked at him with kind eyes and said nothing. He simply picked up a teapot and began to pour tea into the student's cup. He poured and poured. The cup filled to the brim. Then it overflowed. Tea spilled across the table, onto the floor. The student cried out, "Master! Stop! The cup is full. It can hold no more." The master set down the pot. He looked directly at the student. "You are like this cup," he said. "You are so full of your own ideas, your knowledge, your seeking, your concepts of enlightenment. How can I show you anything? You must first empty your cup." This story captures the entire path. Your leaning mind is the full cup. It is full of, "I need, I want, this should be, that shouldn't be." It is full of spiritual concepts, psychological analyses, and personal narratives. It is so full there is no space for the fresh, alive truth of this moment to enter. The practice of stopping the lean is the practice of emptying the cup. It is not an aggressive dumping out. It is a gentle, continuous setting down of each thought, each demand, each story, as you notice you are holding them. You empty the cup by not refilling it. By not reaching for the next idea, the next reassurance, the next source of comfort. You let the cup sit empty. And in that emptiness, something miraculous happens. The whole world pours in. The sound of the wind, the feeling of the breath, the suchness of things as they are, becomes the tea. And you realize you are not the cup. You are the space that holds the cup, the tea, the pouring, and the tasting. You are the whole ceremony. So, as we conclude our time together in Monk's Temple, I invite you into this simple, endless practice. Not as a task to accomplish, but as a loving return, again and again, to what is real. Let's practice right now. Wherever you are, whatever you are doing, just pause. Let your body be, just as it is. No need to adjust, to fix, to improve. Bring your attention to your breathing. Not to change it, but to feel it. The cool air entering, the warm air leaving. Now, scan your mind softly. Is there a leaning happening right now? Is there a subtle reaching for something? A wish for this moment to be different? A worry about a future moment? A regret about a past one? Don't judge it. Don't fight it. Just see it. Name it softly, leaning. Wanting. Worrying. Now, gently, see if you can let that lean go. Like setting down a heavy bag you just realized you were carrying. You don't throw it. You just release your grip. Feel what remains. The sensations in the body. The breath moving. The space around you. The simple fact of being aware. This is it. This is the ground that doesn't shake. This is the sky that holds all weather. This is the well that never runs dry. It has been here all along, beneath the leaning. Your freedom doesn't begin tomorrow. It doesn't begin when you find the perfect teacher, or the perfect relationship, or achieve perfect peace of mind. Your freedom begins now. In this very moment. The moment you stop leaning. From this unleaned place, life can be lived directly. Relationships can be met with clean compassion. Work can be done with full engagement. Joy can be felt without clinging to it. Pain can be experienced without fearing it. This is the gift the Buddha offered. Not a promise of comfort, but a map to the unshakable. A map that leads you back, over and over, to your own 2 feet, standing on the ground of your own aware heart. Thank you for walking this path of honesty. Thank you for your courage to look within. This is not goodbye. Whenever you forget, whenever you feel yourself leaning, remember you can always return here, to this remembering. The clearing in the forest, the quiet of the temple, is always within you. You were never meant to be carried. You were meant to see. And in the seeing, you discover you have always been free. Go in peace. Live from your ground. Welcome home.